Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto was forced to marry Hinata Part 2? A week had passed since the Great Market Massacre, and Naruto's apartment had been transformed into a high-tension battlefield. The minimalist, peaceful sanctuary of the architect was now a chaotic labyrinth of designer shopping bags, silk scarves draped over lampshades, and the pervasive, suffocating scent of imperial jasmine. Naruto trudged down the hallway toward his front door, his shoulders sagging under the weight of a rolled-up set of blueprints and a heavy laptop bag. His hair was even more disheveled than usual, and there were dark circles under his sapphire eyes. Dealing with the structural integrity of the Phoenix Project by day and the structural insanity of Hinata Hyuga by night was starting to erode his soul. He twisted the key and stepped inside. "I'm home," he muttered, his voice devoid of hope. The living room looked like a silk factory had exploded. Hinata was sitting on the sofa that was technically Naruto's bed, wearing a black lace robe that cost more than his car. She was tapping her manicured nails against her gold-plated phone, her face twisted into a pout of tectonic proportions. "You're 4 minutes and 12 seconds late, architect," she announced without looking up. Her voice was cold enough to frost the windows. "The subway was delayed, Hinata. And I had to finalize the sewage schematics for the East Block," Naruto sighed, dropping his bags by the door. Did you do anything today? Other than glaring at the walls?" "I suffered," Hinata snapped, finally looking at him with eyes full of aristocratic fire. "I spent the afternoon realizing that I am living in a space where I have to choose between hanging my dresses or having a kitchen. Do you know what that does to a woman's psyche? I am an heiress, Naruto. I am not meant for efficiency." He started toward the bathroom, grabbing a towel from the hall closet. But as he reached for the handle, he found Hinata standing in his path, her arms crossed, her chin tilted at a haughty, immovable angle. "No," she said flatly. Naruto blinked. "No. What do you mean, no? It's my bathroom, Hinata. I pay the water bill. You are forbidden from entering," she declared, a wicked, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. "I have officially annexed the bathroom for the Hyuga Laundry Initiative. Since you refused to buy me a professional-grade steaming unit, I have had to improvise." "Improvise how?" Naruto asked, a sense of dread pooling in his stomach. Hinata stepped aside and swung the door open. Naruto's jaw hit the floor. The bathroom was no longer a bathroom. It was a drying rack for the most expensive undergarments in the world. Strung across the shower rod, draped over the towel racks, and pinned precariously to the door frame were rows of delicate silk bras, lace panties, and tiny, satin shorts. They were every shade of lavender, black, and crimson, fluttering slightly in the steam. Naruto's face turned a shade of red that defied medical explanation. He immediately spun around, covering his eyes with his hands. "Hinata, why? Why are they all out in the open? Why are they on the door?" "Because there is no space in this pathetic excuse for a home," Hinata shouted, completely unbothered by his embarrassment. "My delicates require specific airflow to maintain their structural elasticity. If I put them in your closet, they will smell like your boring cotton shirts. The bathroom is currently a restricted zone until the silk has breathed. I just want to wash my face." Naruto wailed through his fingers. I can't be in there with those hanging everywhere." "Then don't be," Hinata said, her voice dripping with smug arrogance. She stepped forward, poking him in the chest. "There is a public bathhouse 3 blocks away. I believe it's frequented by laborers and people who eat canned soup. It's perfect for you, architect. Go wash your integrity there and leave my sanctuary alone. You want me to go to a public shower because you've turned our only bathroom into a lingerie exhibit." "Exactly," she purred, walking back to the sofa and reclining like a queen. "And while you're out, bring me a decaf soy latte with exactly 2 drops of vanilla." If it's lukewarm, I'll hang my stockings on your drafting table next. Naruto stood in the hallway, clutching his towel, defeated by a row of silk shorts and a woman who had zero shame and 100% ego. He looked at the closed bathroom door, then at his beautiful, tyrannical wife. I'm moving to the office, he muttered, turning toward the front door. At least the blueprints don't wear lace. Don't forget the latte, servant. Hinata called out, a triumphant giggle echoing through the apartment as Naruto slammed the door. The afternoon sun filtered through the pristine glass windows of the Gilded Lily, an upscale cafe where the espresso cost as much as a small appliance and the chairs were upholstered in velvet the color of crushed pearls. Hinata Hyuga sat perched on the edge of her seat, looking every bit the disenfranchised queen. She was stirring a cup of herbal tea with such aggressive elegance that the silver spoon clinked rhythmically against the porcelain like a ticking time bomb. Opposite her sat Sakura Haruno, who looked exhausted, her head resting in her hand as she stared into her latte. I am living in a construction site, Sakura. A literal, glorified toolbox, Hinata lamented, her voice rising in a dramatic, melodic trill that caused several patrons to look over. Do you know what he brought home yesterday? A plastic bag, filled with onions. He expected me to be impressed by the freshness of dirt-covered vegetables. Sakura sighed, swirling the foam in her cup. At least he brings things home, Hinata. At least he's there. Oh, he's there, Hinata snapped, her lilac eyes flashing. He's everywhere. He's on the sofa, looking like a discarded pile of golden laundry. He's in the kitchen, talking about spatial efficiency, while he burns my toast. And the smell, Sakura. He smells like cedarwood and ambition. It's incredibly distracting when I'm trying to focus on my misery. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The other night, I had to annex the bathroom just to dry my silks, and do you know what he did? He complained. He had the audacity to suggest that his need to wash his face was more important than the structural integrity of my lace. He is a barbarian, Sakura. A handsome, stubborn, infuriatingly principled barbarian who thinks a date is walking through a park and looking at bridge designs. He sounds solid, Sakura murmured, her gaze drifting toward the window. I wish I had solid. I wish I had someone who bothered to argue with me about laundry. Hinata paused, her tea midair. She looked at her friend, seeing the familiar shadow of longing in Sakura's emerald eyes. Still no word from the Uchiha prince. Sakura let out a dry, hollow laugh. I saw him at the gala, as you know. I wore that rose silk gown, the one that makes me look like a masterpiece, and I asked him for one dance. Just one. And, Hinata prompted, though she already knew the answer. He looked through me, Hinata. Not at me. Through me. Like I was a pane of glass that needed cleaning, Sakura whispered, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. He told me he was busy, and then spent the rest of the night staring at your husband like he was trying to calculate how to dismantle him. I'm a high-ranking doctor. I'm successful. I'm right here. And to Sasuke, I'm just a background character in his obsession with power. Hinata softened for a brief second, reaching out to pat Sakura's hand with her gloved fingers. He is an arrogant fool, Sakura. The Uchihas have always been blinded by their own reflection. Maybe, Sakura said, looking up with a sad smile. But I'd give anything to have Sasuke annoy me. I'd sleep on a sofa. I'd eat those dirty onions. I'd even let him burn my toast if it meant he'd actually look at me the way Naruto looks at you when he thinks you aren't watching. Hinata stiffened, her regal mask snapping back into place. Naruto does not look at me in any particular way. He looks at me with confusion and fiscal concern. And don't you dare suggest I'm lucky, Sakura Haruno. I am a Hyuga living in a one-bedroom apartment with a man who owns exactly 3 ties. My life is a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions. Whatever you say, Hinata, Sakura giggled, finally feeling a bit of spirit return. But if you ever decide to throw the architect out, let me know. I think I could use some integrity in my life. Over my dead body, Hinata muttered, taking a sharp sip of her tea. I haven't finished breaking his spirit yet. He still thinks he's the man of the house. I have at least 3 more months of psychological warfare planned before I consider a divorce. As the two women sat in the sun-drenched cafe, one complaining of a life too full and the other of a life too empty, the contrast was as sharp as the diamonds on Hinata's fingers. The following morning, the sun had barely touched the horizon when the peaceful silence of the apartment was shattered. Naruto was deep in a dream about a world where skyscrapers were made of ramen noodles, only to be violently yanked back to reality by the sensation of an ice-cold bucket of water being dumped directly onto his head. Gah! I'm drowning. The levee broke. Structural failure. Naruto shrieked, flailing on the sofa as he surfaced from the freezing deluge, gasping for air. Hinata stood over him, holding a silver designer pitcher, looking absolutely radiant and terrifyingly prepared for the day. She was dressed in a corporate chic outfit that screamed, "I own you and the building you're standing in," a charcoal gray pencil skirt that hugged her curves with lethal precision, a crisp white silk blouse with a high Victorian collar, and black patent leather heels that looked sharp enough to draw blood. "Get up, architect," she commanded, her voice like a whip. "We have a board meeting at the Hyuga headquarters in 45 minutes. My father expects a progress report on the Phoenix project, and I refuse to walk into that boardroom without my trophy husband looking at least semi-conscious." Naruto groaned, wiping water from his eyes. "Hinata, it's 5:30 in the morning. I was up until 3 a.m. calculating the wind load for the North Tower. I'm staying in bed. Go tell your father I've been taken hostage by a couch." He pulled the damp blanket over his head, trying to reclaim his sleep. Hinata's eyes narrowed. She didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small, high-frequency air horn she had purchased specifically for this purpose. BWAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAAA in a panic. Naruto levitated off the sofa, hitting the floor with a dull thud, his hands clamped over his ears. Okay, I'm up. Stop. My eardrums are literally vibrating. Naruto yelled, his hair standing up in wet, golden spikes. Excellent, Hinata purred, smoothing her skirt. Now, put on your suit, the navy one, not the gray one that makes you look like a substitute teacher, and wash that pathetic, sleepy expression off your face. You have 10 minutes before the car arrives. Naruto grumbled, shivering as he stood up. He grabbed his dop kit and shuffled toward the bathroom, his eyes half closed. Fine, fine, I'm going to wash my face. Just give me 5 minutes of silence. He reached for the bathroom door handle, but Hinata was there in a flash, her heel clicking firmly against the wood as she blocked his path. She held up a single, perfectly manicured finger. No, she said, a wicked, triumphant smile spreading across her lips. No, Hinata, I have soap in my eyes. Let me in. The bathroom is currently occupied by the drying process of my vintage lace collection, as we discussed, she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. The humidity from your manly shower would ruin the fibers. And since you failed to fix the ventilation yesterday, I have officially declared the bathroom a no-fly zone for architects. I just need to splash some water on my face. Then I suggest you seek out a natural spring, she said. Before Naruto could protest, she grabbed the back of his shirt and began pushing him toward the front door of the apartment. Wait, Hinata, I'm in my pajamas. I'm wearing a shirt with a cartoon fox on it. It adds character, she remarked, throwing his suit bag and his shoes into his arms. With one final, forceful shove, she pushed him out into the cold, communal hallway and slammed the door shut. Go to the public bathhouse down the street, Naruto. She called through the door, her laughter sounding like silver bells. I hear the water there is filled with the integrity you love so much. I'll pick you up on the corner in 20 minutes. Don't be late, or I'll tell the board you're a figment of my imagination. Naruto stood in the hallway, dripping wet, holding a suit bag and wearing slippers, while his elderly neighbor, Mr. Ono, stared at him while holding a bag of trash. Rough morning, son, the old man asked. Naruto sighed, leaning his head against the door. I'm married to a hurricane, Mr. Ono. A very, very expensive hurricane. The glass and steel monolith of Hyuga Enterprises stood as a monument to ancient power and modern greed. Inside the lobby, the air-conditioned silence was broken by the rhythmic, sharp clack of heels that sounded like a countdown to an explosion. Hinata Hyuga didn't just walk into her headquarters, she invaded it. She looked like a high-fashion warlord in her charcoal pencil skirt and a silk blouse that shone like liquid silver. But the real spectacle was the man trailing exactly 3 paces behind her. Naruto Namikaze, the city's rising star architect, was currently living a nightmare designed in a laboratory. Hinata had forced him into a pair of oversized, pitch-black designer sunglasses that covered half his face. It adds mystery, she had told him. And it hides the fact that you look like you slept on a park bench. In his right hand, Naruto was forced to carry her limited edition, cream-colored crocodile leather handbag, gripping it as if it were a live grenade. In his left, he carried her spare tablet, a bottle of imported sparkling water, and a single, long-stemmed white lily she had decided she needed at the last second. Head up, architect, Hinata commanded without looking back, her voice carrying across the lobby like a royal decree. You are walking like a man who is ashamed of his lineage. You are a Hyuga by marriage. Act like you aren't thinking about the price of eggs. I can't see anything, Hinata. Naruto hissed, his voice muffled by the glasses. I'm wearing sunglasses indoors. I feel like a bodyguard who failed his training. And why am I holding your purse? People are staring. They aren't staring at the bag, Naruto. They are staring at the privilege of you being allowed to touch it, she snapped, her chin tilting even higher as she passed the security desk. The guards snapped to attention. The receptionist stood up as if the national anthem were playing. Hinata didn't even acknowledge them, she simply glided toward the executive elevators, her dark hair swaying with a rhythmic, hypnotic arrogance. Naruto, struggling with the sunglasses and the sheer weight of the handbag, nearly collided with a decorative marble pillar. I'm going to trip, Hinata. If I break my nose on a statue of your great-grandfather, I'm suing for structural negligence. If you trip, I will tell the board you are performing a contemporary dance piece about the struggles of the working class, she replied coolly. They reached the elevator. As the doors opened, a group of high-level executives scrambled out, bowing deeply. Hinata stepped inside, and Naruto followed, sighing in relief as the doors closed. He immediately snatched the sunglasses off his face, blinking against the bright LED lights. I hate this, Naruto groaned, leaning against the mirrored wall. I hate the sunglasses. I hate the bag. I hate that your office smells like a flower shop had a fight with a perfume factory. I have blueprints in my pocket for a building that could change the city, and here I am, acting as a glorified valet for a woman who thinks budget is a dirty word. Hinata turned to face him, her lilac eyes scanning his disheveled hair. She reached out, her gloved hand moving toward his face. Naruto flinched, expecting a strike, but she simply straightened his tie with a slow, deliberate precision. You are not a valet, Naruto, she whispered, her voice suddenly dropping into that dangerous, velvety tone that made his heart do a nervous somersault. You are the face of my redemption. My father believes you are the anchor that keeps me from drifting into scandal. So, for the next hour, you will stand behind me, you will look expensive, and you will hold my bag as if it contains the secrets to the universe. She stepped back as the elevator chimed for the penthouse floor. Before the doors opened, she reached out and shoved the sunglasses back onto his nose. Purse up, architect, she commanded, her arrogant smirk returning. The vultures are hungry, and I need you to look like a feast. The doors slid open. A dozen board members stood waiting. Hinata stepped out, the epitome of Hyuga power, with Naruto trailing behind her, holding a purse and silently praying for the ceiling to collapse. The air in the Hyuga boardroom was thin, filtered by the most expensive air purification system money could buy and chilled to a temperature that favored polar bears and cold-blooded executives. At the center of the room sat a massive table made of a single slab of polished obsidian, around which sat the vultures, the 12 board members of Hyuga Enterprises. At the head of the table sat Hiashi, his hands steepled, his eyes unreadable. And beside him, Hinata sat like a dark queen, her posture so straight it looked painful. And then there was Naruto. He was standing 2 paces behind Hinata's chair, still wearing the oversized sunglasses, clutching the cream-colored crocodile handbag against his chest like a shield. He felt the weight of every gaze in the room. These people didn't see the man who had graduated top of his class in architecture, they didn't see the visionary behind the Phoenix project. They saw a servant in a navy suit. Now, Hinata began, her voice ringing out with a terrifying, melodic authority. Regarding the zoning permits for the East Block. Assistant, the files. Naruto stiffened. Assistant. He looked down at the back of her head, his jaw tightening so hard he heard his teeth grind. He reached into the bag, feeling remarkably ridiculous as his large, calloused hand fumbled with the delicate silk lining, and pulled out a tablet. He handed it to her without a word. The water, assistant, she commanded 3 minutes later, not even looking back. Room temperature. 2 ice cubes. No more, no less. Naruto felt a vain throb in his temple. He felt the gaze of Neji from across the table, a gaze filled with a mixture of pity and smug satisfaction. Naruto reached for the bottle of sparkling water, poured it with trembling hands, and set it beside Hinata. You missed a droplet on the coaster, Hinata remarked casually, waving a hand toward the table. Clean it. We can't have the obsidian stained by common water. A ripple of stifled laughter went around the table. Naruto's face was a deep, burning crimson behind his sunglasses. He took a silk handkerchief and wiped the spot, his fingers shaking not with fear, but with a suppressed, volcanic rage. He was a creator. He was a man of logic and stone. And here he was, being treated like a domestic pet in front of the most powerful people in the country. As you can see, Hinata continued, addressing the board as if Naruto were a piece of furniture, my new acquisition is quite functional. He's been trained to handle the smaller details so I can focus on the grander vision of the Hyuga legacy. He's quite sturdy, isn't he? Good for carrying heavy burdens. He seems well behaved, one of the elder board members chuckled, eyeing Naruto like a horse at an auction. Naruto had reached his limit. The integrity architect had no integrity left to give in this room. He felt the Phoenix project blueprints in his inner pocket, the plans he had stayed up all night to perfect, and realized these people didn't care about the buildings. They cared about the theater. He didn't say a word. He didn't explode. He didn't defend his honor. Slowly, Naruto leaned forward and placed Hinata's handbag on the table with a heavy, final thud. He took off the oversized sunglasses and laid them neatly on top of the bag. His sapphire eyes were no longer filled with confusion, they were cold, flat, and utterly exhausted. He looked at Hiashi, then at the laughing board members, and finally at the back of Hinata's neck. Without a single sound, he turned on his heel. Assistant, where are you going? Hinata asked, her voice faltering for a split second as she felt the shift in the room's energy. The presentation isn't finished. I need my notes for the sewage schematics. Naruto didn't stop. He walked toward the massive mahogany doors. Naruto, I am speaking to you. Hinata called out, her voice sharpening into a command. He reached the doors, pushed them open, and stepped out into the hallway, the heavy wood clicking shut behind him with a sound of absolute finality. Inside the room, a brief, stunned silence followed. Then, the tension snapped. Hinata threw her head back and let out a sharp, mocking laugh that echoed off the obsidian table. Oh, look at that! She cried, her voice dripping with derision as she looked at the board members. The commoner has a temper. How quaint. He actually thinks his pride is worth more than the floor he walks on. She picked up the sunglasses and spun them on her finger, her eyes glittering with a cruel, vibrant light. Don't worry, father. He'll be back. They always come back once they realize the world outside this building is cold and expensive. He's probably gone to cry in the service elevator. The board members joined in her laughter, a chorus of high society mockery that followed Naruto all the way down to the lobby. Hinata laughed the loudest, but as she looked at the empty space behind her chair, her grip on the sunglasses tightened until her knuckles turned white. The game was becoming more interesting, but for the first time, the Ice Queen felt a strange, flickering chill in her own heart. The heavy glass doors of the Hyuga headquarters hissed shut behind Naruto, cutting off the sound of the boardroom's mocking laughter, but the ringing in his ears remained. He stormed down the marble steps, his tie loosened and his chest heaving. The cool city air hit his face, but it wasn't enough to douse the fire of humiliation burning in his gut. He felt like a fool. He had spent years studying the laws of physics and the beauty of form, only to be reduced to a handbag accessory for a woman who treated people like chess pieces. He began to walk aimlessly, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his jaw set so tight it ached. Every person he passed in a suit looked like a vulture, every skyscraper looked like a cage. I'm done, he muttered to the pavement. Let them find another architect to bully. Let them find another assistant to carry their crocodile skin. He reached a quiet side street where the shadows of the tall buildings stretched out like long, dark fingers. He stopped to catch his breath, leaning his forehead against the cold brick of an alleyway. Well, if it isn't the king of integrity, looking like he just survived a building collapse. Naruto froze. That voice was like a blade wrapped in silk, composed, arrogant, and unmistakably Uchiha. He straightened up and turned, his eyes narrowing. Sasuke Uchiha was leaning against a black lamp post, looking like he had stepped off the cover of a high-fashion magazine for villains. He was still in his dark, tailored suit, but he had discarded his jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and between his fingers, a thin trail of smoke rose from a cigarette. Not now, Sasuke, Naruto snapped, his voice raw. I am really, truly not in the mood for your riddles or your recruitment speeches. Go find someone else to condescend to. Sasuke took a slow, deliberate drag of the cigarette, the embers glowing in the dim light of the alley. He exhaled a cloud of smoke that swirled around his dark hair. You look pathetic, Naruto. Even for a man who just married a Hyuga. What happened? Did she finally find a leash that was too tight, or did you realize that integrity doesn't pay the rent in a world of gold and glass? I said leave it. Naruto stepped forward, his fists clenching. You don't know anything about it. You're just like her. You think everything is a game. Sasuke flicked the ash onto the pavement, his dark eyes tracking Naruto's movements with a chilling, predatory stillness. I know more than you think. I know that you just walked out of a board meeting with your head down. I know that Hinata is currently laughing at your expense. And I know that you have nowhere to go where her shadow won't follow you. He stepped away from the lamp post, tossing the cigarette and crushing it under the heel of his Italian leather shoe. You look like you need a drink, or at least a place to sit where someone isn't demanding a latte. Come. I'm not going anywhere with you, Naruto growled. That wasn't a request, Sasuke said, his voice dropping into a low, commanding rasp. Before Naruto could protest, Sasuke reached out and gripped Naruto's arm with a strength that was surprising for a man who spent his days behind a computer. He didn't wait for an answer, he simply began walking, dragging the exhausted architect toward a sleek, black sedan parked at the curb. Let go. Naruto struggled, but his spirit was too drained to truly fight back. Sit down and shut up, Naruto, Sasuke muttered, shoving him toward the open door of the car. I'm taking you to a place where the tea isn't served in porcelain and the people don't care about your last name. You can either walk there with me, or I can have my driver toss you in the trunk. Your choice. Naruto looked at the black car, then at the dark, intense face of the man who was supposed to be his rival. He let out a long, shuddering breath and slumped into the leather seat. Fine, Naruto whispered, staring out the window as the car pulled away. But if you start talking about paradise again, I'm jumping out while the car is moving. Sasuke sat beside him, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips as he signaled the driver. Don't worry, architect. Today, we aren't talking about buildings. We're talking about survival. The car sped off into the heart of the city, leaving the Hyuga Tower, and the Laughing Ice Queen, far behind in the rearview mirror. The boardroom had cleared, leaving only a heavy, suffocating silence and the lingering scent of expensive tobacco and Hinata's jasmine perfume. The obsidian table reflected the harsh overhead lights like a black mirror. Hiyashi Hyuga stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to his daughter, watching the city below. Hinata sat reclined in her leather throne, her legs crossed with a sharp, elegant precision. She was spinning the oversized sunglasses Naruto had left behind on her fingertip, a faint, mocking smile playing on her lips. That was quite a performance, Hinata, Hiyashi said, his voice low and vibrating with a suppressed thunder. Wasn't it? Hinata chuckled, the sound as cold as ice shards hitting a marble floor. The way his face turned that delicious shade of red just before he bolted. I haven't been that entertained since I crashed my Ferrari into the fountain at the country club. He truly has the temperament of a glass house, father. Fragile and easy to shatter. Hiyashi turned around slowly. His face was a mask of stern disappointment, his pale eyes narrow. You went too far. Naruto Namikaze is not a stable boy or a hired driver. He is your husband. He is the man whose signature is currently the only thing standing between this company and a federal investigation into our irregular foundations. Hinata's smile vanished, replaced by a look of profound, haughty boredom. She stood up, her silk skirts hissing against the chair. My husband. She spat the word as if it were poison. He is a convenient puppet you tied to my wrist to save your own reputation. Don't lecture me on. Too far, father. You are the one who dragged that golden-haired peasant out of the dirt and forced him into my life. Whatever happens to his fragile little ego is not my concern. It is your fault for choosing a man who actually believes in things like pride and feelings. She walked toward her father, her heels clicking with a predatory rhythm. He is a tool, a beautiful, dull-witted tool. And tools do not get to have tantrums in boardrooms. He is a man of talent, Hinata. A man who could actually help you lead this empire if you weren't so obsessed with breaking him. Hiyashi stepped forward, his presence looming over her. You will fix this. The press is already asking why the integrity architect left the Hyuga headquarters looking like he'd been struck by lightning. This happy couple charade is the only currency we have left. Hinata let out a sharp, jagged laugh. You want me to fix it? What do you suggest? Shall I bake him a cake? Or perhaps I should buy him a new set of crayons so he can draw more of his pathetic little parks. You will apologize to him, Hiyashi commanded, his voice dropping an octave into a tone that usually made board members tremble. Tonight, you will go to that apartment, and you will ensure he is standing beside you at the gala tomorrow. If he walks away, the Phoenix Project collapses. And if that collapses, Hinata, I will strip you of your titles and your accounts faster than you can blink. Hinata froze. The threat hit her like a physical blow, but her pride was an armor made of diamond. She didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head, her lilac eyes glowing with a dark, vengeful brilliance. Apologize, she whispered, the words sounding foreign in her mouth. She began to laugh again, a high, mocking sound that echoed through the empty hall. You want a Hyuga to apologize to a man who buys his clothes from a rack? A man who thinks a balanced diet includes instant ramen. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the cold silver handle. She looked back at her father, her expression one of pure, unadulterated malice. I will go to the apartment, father. And I will make sure he is at the gala, she purred, her voice dripping with a sugary, lethal intent. But I will not apologize. I will remind him of his place. And by the time I am finished with him tonight, he will be so grateful for my attention that he'll thank me for the privilege of carrying my bag. You wanted me to handle him. Fine, I'll handle him, but don't expect him to have any integrity left when I'm through. Hinata, save it, she snapped, her regal mask snapping back into place. The Ice Queen doesn't bow to architects. She only builds cages for them. She swept out of the room, leaving her father in the shadows. As she walked down the long, silent hallway, her mind was already spinning with new ways to torment Naruto. If he wanted to play the silent, wounded martyr, she would give him a reason to stay silent forever. The cafe was hidden at the end of a cobblestone alley, a place of dark wood, low amber lighting, and the heavy scent of roasted beans. It was far removed from the glass towers of the Hyuga and the sterile offices of the city's elite. Sasuke Uchiha sat across from Naruto, his movements fluid and aristocratic. He poured a stream of dark, steaming tea into a ceramic cup with a steady hand. Naruto sat slumped in his chair, his tie undone, staring into his own cup as if the dark liquid held the blueprints to a life he no longer understood. She treats me like an accessory, Sasuke, Naruto muttered, his voice thick with a mixture of exhaustion and suppressed rage. Not even an accessory. A servant. A ghost. I walk into that boardroom with the Phoenix Project, something that could actually help people, and she turns me into a stand for her handbag. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the arrogance, the rules, and this entire sham of a marriage. Sasuke took a slow sip of his tea, his dark eyes watching Naruto over the rim of the cup. Inside, a cold, predatory satisfaction began to bloom. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. The foundation was cracking. I told you from the beginning, Naruto, Sasuke said, his voice a low, smooth drawl. Hinata Hyuga was never meant for someone like you. She is a creature of high walls and ancient bloodlines. She is rich, she is spoiled, and she views the world as her personal playground. You, for all your talent and your integrity, are a man of the earth. Marrying her wasn't a union, it was a structural error. Naruto let out a long, shuddering breath. I know. Believe me, I know. Sasuke leaned forward, the shadows of the cafe playing across his sharp features. Then tell me, Naruto, why did you do it? A man like you doesn't just sell his soul for a title. And let's be honest. How does a woman like Hinata, who views even the Uchiha as new money, look at a man from the common masses and say, I do? Naruto went silent. He stared at a crack in the wooden table, his jaw tightening. The secret of the scandal, the Phoenix Project deal, and the pressure from Hiashi weighed heavily on his tongue, but he remained mute. He couldn't reveal the truth, not even to a man who claimed to be a friend. Sasuke waited, his eyes searching Naruto's face for a weakness. When the silence stretched too long, he let out a dry, mocking chuckle. Fine. Keep your secrets. It doesn't matter how the cage was built, only that you're trapped in it. Sasuke leaned back, a malicious glint appearing in his eyes. He flicked a speck of dust off his sleeve. But tell me something more personal, Naruto. Is she as cold as she looks? In that tiny apartment, on those long nights, have you actually touched her? Have you shared a bed with the Ice Queen? Naruto's face instantly exploded into a deep, burning crimson. He nearly choked on his tea, coughing as he glared at Sasuke. What? Sasuke? That's none of your business. You're a pervert, you know that. It's a simple question, Sasuke said, his smirk widening. Did you manage to melt the ice, or are you still sleeping on the sofa like a good little assistant? I don't touch her, Naruto snapped, his embarrassment turning into defensive anger. We haven't. I sleep on the couch, okay. She's made it very clear that I'm not even allowed to breathe the same air as her silk sheets. I haven't even touched her hand unless it was for a camera. Sasuke's eyes flashed with a sudden, vibrant joy. It was the best news he had heard in years. If the marriage hadn't been consummated, if Naruto was still an outsider in his own home, then the Hyuga throne was still technically vacant for the right man. No contact at all, Sasuke whispered, his voice dripping with a dark, plotting satisfaction. How tragic for you, Naruto. A beautiful woman in the next room and you're relegated to the upholstery. Naruto stood up, shaking with frustration. I'm leaving. I didn't come here to be interrogated about my life by an Uchiha. Sit down, Naruto, Sasuke said, his voice regaining its cold authority. I told you I had a solution for your misery, didn't I? Naruto paused, his hand on the back of the chair. He looked at Sasuke, desperate for any way out of the nightmare he was living. What solution could you possibly have? Unless you have a time machine to stop that wedding. Sasuke looked up at him, his face a mask of deceptive calm, though his mind was already calculating the steps to claim Hinata for himself once Naruto was out of the way. It's simple, really, Sasuke said, his eyes locking onto Naruto's with a sinister intensity. If the marriage is a cage, and the woman is a monster, then leave. Find someone else. Marry another woman, Naruto. Someone who isn't a Hyuga. The dim light of the cafe flickered, casting long, sharp shadows across Sasuke's pale face. He watched Naruto with the cold, calculating precision of a grandmaster looking at a pawn. What do you think, Naruto? Sasuke asked, his voice a low, melodic vibration. Naruto stared at him, his blue eyes wide with genuine bewilderment. He let out a dry, humorless laugh, leaning back as if he needed physical distance from the absurdity of the suggestion. What do I think? I think you've finally lost it, Sasuke. Marry someone else. I'm currently drowning in a marriage that feels like a life sentence in a silk-lined prison, and your advice is to jump into another one. I'm not interested in marriage, period. I just want to build my projects and sleep in a bed that isn't a sofa. Sasuke didn't flinch. He reached for his tea, the steam swirling around his dark eyes. Don't be so dramatic. I'm speaking from experience. Look at me. I am married to a woman the world considers the pinnacle of beauty and grace. Her name is Sakura. Naruto blinked. Sakura, the doctor. I've seen her. She seems devoted to you. Devoted? Sasuke echoed, the word sounding like a bitter insult on his tongue. And yet, I am utterly miserable. She is a constant noise in a life that requires silence. I plan to divorce her soon. I tell you this because you need to understand. A happy marriage is a myth for men like us. But there are degrees of misery. Your current degree is unsustainable. Naruto leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. The exhaustion in his bones was suddenly replaced by a sharp, architectural instinct. He was looking at Sasuke's logic and seeing the cracks in the foundation. Why are you telling me this, Sasuke? You aren't the type to share marital woes over tea unless there's a blueprint behind it. You have an interest in this. A big one. A thin, dark smirk ghosted across Sasuke's lips. You've grown sharper in that apartment, Naruto. Very well. I'll be direct. He set his cup down with a sharp clack. I wanted to marry Hinata. Long before you even knew her name, she was the only woman I considered my equal in status and pride. I was preparing to make my move, to merge the Uchiha and Hyuga empires into something the world had never seen. Naruto sat frozen, the air in his lungs suddenly feeling heavy. You wanted her. I was going to propose, Sasuke continued, his voice dropping into a dangerous, icy rasp. And then, like a bad joke, I woke up to the news that her wedding to a nobody architect was scheduled for the following day. You stole a throne you don't even know how to sit on, Naruto. Naruto's shock was visceral. He felt a strange, hot prickle of something he didn't want to identify. Was it jealousy? Or just the sheer madness of the situation? So this is a trade. You want me to just hand her over? I am offering you a way out, Sasuke said, his eyes glowing with a sinister, manipulative light. I have connections. I can find a woman who is soft, kind, and who will look at you with the admiration you deserve. A woman who won't care about your bank account or your commoner status. You get your life back. You get a real home. He leaned in across the table, his face inches from Naruto's. And in exchange, you leave Hinata. You walk away, the divorce goes through quietly, and you leave her to a man who actually knows how to handle an ice queen. Leave her to me, Naruto. You get happiness, I get the empire. Naruto stared at him, the silence of the cafe suddenly echoing with the weight of the proposal. He looked at Sasuke, his supposed friend, and saw the hunger of a man who wanted to own the world, and Hinata was the final piece of the puzzle. You're serious, Naruto whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and a sudden, inexplicable anger. I am an Uchiha, Sasuke replied coldly. I am always serious. Think about it, architect. Your sofa is waiting for you, but it doesn't have to be. The atmosphere in the dimly lit cafe shifted from thick tension to a freezing, crystalline stillness. Naruto sat unmoving, his sapphire eyes fixed on Sasuke with a clarity that seemed to pierce through the Uchiha's calculated shadows. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the city and the soft hiss of the espresso machine. You think you've mapped me out, don't you, Sasuke? Naruto began, his voice surprisingly low and steady. You look at me and see a man who's been broken by silk and high heels. And you're right about one thing. I hate how she treats me. I hate the arrogance, the mockery, and the way she looks at the world like it's a smudge on her window. I hate that I've spent more time on a sofa than in a bed since the day we met. Sasuke's smirk deepened, his fingers drumming a victory march on the wooden table. Then the choice is simple. Walk away. Let me deal with the storm. No, Naruto said, the word ringing out like a hammer hitting an anvil. Sasuke's fingers stopped. His brow arched in genuine surprise. No, you just admitted you despise the life she's forced on you. Why stay in a burning building when I'm holding the exit door open? Naruto stood up slowly, his posture regaining the architectural precision that defined his work. He looked down at Sasuke, not with anger, but with a profound, towering dignity. Because I'm an architect, Sasuke. I don't walk away from a project just because the terrain is difficult or the materials are volatile. I took a vow, not to the Hyuga name, and not even to her, but to my own word. If I leave her now, in the middle of this mess, just to trade her for some soft, quiet life you've curated for me, then I'm exactly the weak, hollow peasant she thinks I am. Naruto leaned over the table, his eyes burning with a fierce, blue fire. I might be her assistant in that boardroom, and I might be her butler in that apartment, but I am still the man who holds the blueprints. I won't be a piece in your game, and I won't be a pawn in hers. I'll see this through on my own terms. My integrity isn't for sale, not even for a real home. The silence that followed was heavy. Then, slowly, a sound began to rise from Sasuke's throat, a dry, rhythmic chuckle that escalated into a genuine, dark laugh. Sasuke threw his head back, his black hair spilling over his forehead as he laughed with a strange sort of admiration. Incredible, Sasuke breathed, wiping a stray tear of mirth from his eye. You really are a fool, Naruto. A magnificent, stubborn, suicidal fool. I offer you a kingdom, and you choose a lumpy sofa out of some misplaced sense of honor. Your pride is even more bloated than the Hyuga's. It's not pride, Sasuke, Naruto said, straightening his suit jacket and turning toward the exit. It's a foundation. Something you wouldn't understand. As Naruto reached the door, his hand on the brass handle, Sasuke's voice drifted through the shadows, cold and enigmatic. Go then, architect, Sasuke called out, his eyes glinting like obsidian. Go back to your ice queen. But remember this, even the strongest foundations crumble when the ground beneath them wants to fall. Ask yourself, Naruto, who is really keeping that roof over your head? You, or the woman who enjoys watching you struggle to hold it up? Naruto didn't look back. He pushed the door open and stepped out into the night air, the weight of the city, and his marriage, resting firmly on his shoulders. The moon hung low over the city, casting long, skeletal shadows across the industrial district where Naruto's apartment stood like a lonely sentinel. Inside the building, the elevator groaned, a sound Hinata usually compared to a dying animal, as it ascended to the fourth floor. The doors slid open with a sharp ping, and Hinata Hyuga stepped out. She looked as if she had just walked off a battlefield of silken spite. Her charcoal skirt was slightly creased, her silver blouse shimmered under the flickering hallway lights, and her eyes, those cold, lavender orbs, were narrowed into slits of high-velocity irritation. In her hand, she clutched the designer sunglasses Naruto had left on the boardroom table like a captured trophy. She reached the door and didn't knock. A Hyuga does not knock on a door they technically own by marital conquest. She slid her key into the lock, twisted it with a sharp, violent click, and flung the door open. Architect, she commanded, her voice ringing through the hallway with the sharp authority of a silver bell. I am home. You will come here immediately and explain why you think a dramatic exit is an appropriate response to my administrative instructions. Silence. The apartment was bathed in a thick, heavy darkness. The only light came from the neon blue sign of a 24-hour laundromat across the street, casting rhythmic pulses of sapphire light across the hardwood floor. Hinata's brow arched in genuine confusion. She reached out and slapped the light switch. The warm amber glow of Naruto's minimalist lamps flooded the room, revealing nothing. The navy blue sofa, his kingdom, was empty. The thin fleece blanket was folded neatly at one end. His drafting table was silent, the mechanical pencils lined up like soldiers awaiting a general who hadn't returned. Naruto. Hinata's voice dropped from a command to a sharp, suspicious query. She marched into the kitchen, her heels clicking like a ticking clock. If you are hiding in the pantry to avoid my gaze, I assure you, it will only make your punishment more structurally significant. She flung open the pantry door. A box of instant ramen stared back at her. Where is he? She hissed to the empty room. She checked the bedroom, the sanctuary she had forbidden him from entering. It was pristine, smelling faintly of her jasmine perfume, but empty of any golden-haired architects. She walked back into the living room, her breath hitching slightly. For the first time in a week, the apartment felt vast. Too large. Without the sound of his pencil scratching against paper or the low hum of his tuneless whistling, the space felt hollow, like a building with its support beams ripped out. She looked at the small wooden coffee table. There, sitting in the center, was the single white lily she had made him carry all morning. It was slightly wilted, its head drooping toward the wood. He actually left, she whispered to herself. A surge of volcanic fury rose in her chest, followed closely by a strange, cold prickle of something that felt dangerously like panic. She snatched her phone from her bag, her thumbs flying across the screen. How dare he? She shrieked at the walls, her aristocratic mask cracking. How dare he leave without my permission? I am the one who decides when the day is over. I am the one who dictates the terms of this domestic arrangement. She paced the small living room, her silk skirts swishing aggressively. She imagined him wandering the streets, perhaps sitting in some low-class bar, telling commoners about his mean wife. The thought made her blood boil. You are a tool, Naruto Namikaze. She yelled, slamming her hand onto his drafting table. A tool, and tools do not simply walk out of the shed. She stopped, her eyes falling on his jacket hanging by the door. He had left without his heavy coat. The night air was freezing. Hinata stood in the center of the silent apartment, the blue neon light from the window pulsing against her pale skin. She was the Ice Queen, the heiress of the most powerful corporation in the city, the woman who had everything. And yet, as she looked at the empty, lumpy sofa, she realized with a jolt of terrifying clarity that for the first time in her life, she had no one to command. The silence was the loudest thing she had ever heard. Come back here, Naruto, she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and an ego that was suddenly, inexplicably bruised. Come back here so I can tell you how much I hate you. The clock on the wall ticked with a rhythmic, heartless precision, marking 3 hours since Hinata had plunged the apartment into darkness. She didn't sit on the sofa, she stood in the shadows near the foyer, draped in her silk robe like a ghost haunting her own life. The air was cold, the silence heavy, until the muffled sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. The lock turned. Slow. Deliberate. Naruto stepped inside, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the corridor. He didn't reach for the light switch. He didn't call out. He just let out a long, weary sigh and moved to set his keys on the counter. Do you usually make a habit of abandoning your post, architect? The voice came from the pitch-black corner. Naruto jumped, his heart leaping into his throat as Hinata stepped forward. The blue neon light from the window illuminated her face. Her eyes were wide, glowing with a terrifying, predatory intensity. Hinata, you scared the life out of me, Naruto breathed, rubbing his face. Why are you standing in the dark? I was waiting for my servant to return, she hissed, her voice trembling with a week's worth of suppressed ego. She marched toward him, the clicking of her heels sounding like a death march. How dare you? How dare you walk out of that meeting? How dare you leave me here in this box, wondering where you've crawled off to? I needed a walk, Hinata. I needed to breathe, Naruto said quietly. His voice was flat, devoid of the usual spark she loved to extinguish. You needed to breathe, Hinata shrieked, her hands clenching at her sides. I gave you a name. I gave you a status that your pathetic bloodline could never dream of. And you reward me by making me look like a fool in front of the board. She lunged forward, grabbing the lapels of his jacket with a strength born of pure, unadulterated rage. She jerked him toward her, her face inches from his. Look at me. I am Hinata Hyuga. I do not wait for anyone. I do not tolerate disobedience. You are a tool, Naruto. A tool that I am starting to find defective. Naruto looked down at her. Usually, he would stammer. He would apologize. He would make a joke to soften the blow. But tonight, he just looked at her hands on his chest. Gently, but with a firmness that surprised her, he reached up and pried her fingers off his jacket. He stepped back, creating a gap between them that felt like a canyon. Is that all I am to you, Hinata? He asked, his voice eerily calm. Just a project. A defective hammer. You are a convenience. She yelled, her pride reaching a fever pitch. I don't like you. I don't want you. I despise the way you breathe, the way you look at those stupid blueprints, and the way you think you have any right to stand beside me. I hate you, Naruto Namikaze. Every second I spend in this room with you is a second I feel my soul being dragged into the dirt. She expected him to shout back. She wanted him to beg. She wanted him to prove he was still there, still fighting for her approval. Instead, Naruto just nodded. He looked at the floor, then back at her with a sad, distant smile. I know, he said softly. I've known since the wedding day. And honestly, it's okay. If it's that much of a burden for you, you can just ask for a divorce. I won't fight you. I'll tell your father it was my fault. I'll walk away from the Phoenix project, the apartment, all of it. You can have your silence back. The world seemed to stop spinning. Hinata's eyes widened, her pupils dilating until the lavender was almost swallowed by black. The air left her lungs as if she had been punched. She waited for the punchline, for the integrity architect to tell her he was joking, but his face remained a mask of calm, tired resignation. Divorce. The word echoed in the empty room. For years, she had fought for independence, but now that he was offering it, a strange, terrifying coldness began to spread through her chest. It wasn't the coldness of her pride, it was a hollow, aching void she had never felt before. It was the feeling of a foundation finally giving way. She opened her mouth to speak, to tell him he was a fool, but no sound came out. Her throat was tight, her hands were shaking. I'm going to stay at the office tonight, Naruto said, turning back toward the door. I think we both need some space to realize that this, whatever this was, wasn't meant to be built. He didn't look back. The door opened, the hallway light spilled in for a fleeting second, and then, click, it was gone. He was gone. Hinata stood alone in the center of the room. The silence she had claimed to want was now a screaming weight. Her legs felt weak, the strength leaving her body all at once. She stumbled back and sank onto the navy blue sofa, the lumpy, cheap sofa she had mocked every single day. She stared at the door, her hands clutched in her lap. Her heart was beating with a frantic, desperate rhythm. She had won. She had pushed him away. She had asserted her dominance. So why did she feel like she was the one who had been discarded? She sat there in the dark, the neon blue light pulsing over her, a single, hot tear finally breaking through the ice of her gaze. The morning sun crept through the blinds of the apartment, casting skeletal golden bars across the hardwood floor. In the bedroom, Hinata Hyuga stirred beneath her silk sheets, her lashes fluttering against her pale cheeks. For a fleeting, blissful second, the world was normal. She felt the familiar, haughty weight of her own importance pressing down on her, and she prepared her lungs for the first command of the day. Architect, she called out, her voice raspy with sleep but still edged with a royal sharpness. The sunlight is offensive. Adjust the blinds. And I require my water, lukewarm, with exactly 2 seeds for aesthetic bitterness. She waited. Usually, this was the moment she would hear the frantic scuffle of feet, the rhythmic thud of Naruto tripping over a stray rug, and his exasperated but compliant voice saying, I'm on it, I'm on it. Just give me a second to find the picture. But there was no scuffle. No thud. No voice. The silence in the apartment was absolute, thick enough to be felt like a physical pressure against her eardrums. The realization hit her like a bucket of ice water, draining the warmth from her limbs. He was gone. Hinata sat up, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders in a tangled mess. She looked at the closed bedroom door, the door she had slammed in his face just last night. Slowly, she swung her legs out of bed, her feet touching the cold floor. She didn't reach for her silk robe. She didn't check her reflection in the gilded mirror. She simply walked toward the living room, her heart thumping a slow, hollow beat in her chest. The living room was exactly as he had left it. The navy blue sofa was perfectly flat, the blanket folded with architectural precision at the foot. There was no golden-haired man sprawled across it, no messy pile of blueprints on the coffee table, no smell of cheap coffee and cedarwood. It was pristine. It was orderly. It was everything she had demanded it be. And it was utterly, terrifyingly empty. I don't care, Hinata whispered to the shadows, her voice trembling. I am a Hyuga. I do not miss people. I certainly do not miss architects who sleep on furniture. She marched into the kitchen, her stomach growling with a petty, insistent hunger. She would make her own breakfast. How hard could it be? She had watched him do it a dozen times while she stood in the doorway and critiqued his technique. She opened the refrigerator. It was stocked with the commoner groceries they had bought at the market. She stared at a carton of eggs as if they were alien artifacts. She reached for a croissant he had bought for her, a peace offering, from 2 days ago, and placed it on a small plate. I shall warm it, she declared to the empty kitchen. In the humming box, she approached the microwave, the device she had called a demon's trap, only days prior. She stared at the buttons. Power level, defrost, popcorn, start, she commanded, pressing the button with a gloved finger. Nothing happened. The machine remained dark, its glass eye judging her. I said, start, she snapped, pressing it harder. She began to mash the buttons frantically. 30 seconds, pizza, timer, stop, but the microwave refused to acknowledge her existence. It required a sequence, a logic, a sequence of inputs that Naruto handled with a mindless, practiced ease. She slammed her fist against the side of the microwave, and for a second, the digital clock blinked 0 before fading back into darkness. She stood there, alone in the quiet kitchen, holding a cold, unwarmed croissant. The silence of the apartment seemed to laugh at her. Every corner of the room was a reminder of her own incompetence in the face of the real world Naruto had tried to show her. She looked at the sofa again. She remembered the way he had looked at her last night, not with anger, but with a soul-crushing pity. You can just ask for a divorce. I'll tell your father it was my fault. He was willing to throw away his career, his reputation, and the Phoenix Project, just to give her the silence she had screamed for. Hinata sank onto the kitchen floor, her silk pajamas pooling around her like a fallen cloud. She didn't eat the croissant. She just sat there, staring at the empty living room, feeling the vast, echoing void where a noisy, clumsy, integrity-filled man used to be. The silence of the apartment was no longer peaceful, it was a rhythmic, suffocating taunt. Hinata sat at the small, minimalist dining table, her posture still perfectly regal, her chin tilted at that familiar angle of divine entitlement. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than the building's annual property tax, and she held a sterling silver spoon poised over a bowl of cereal, the only thing she had managed to assemble, without the risk of a structural fire. This milk is insufficiently chilled, she declared to the empty room, her voice echoing off the clean, white walls. And the ratio of grain to liquid is, offensively amateur. She waited for the rebuttal. She waited for Naruto to poke his head out from behind his drafting table and tell her that she was the one who poured it. She waited for him to make a goofy face and offer to re-engineer her breakfast. But the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Hinata's grip on the spoon tightened until her knuckles turned a ghostly white. A surge of hot, familiar arrogance boiled in her chest. Fine, she snapped, standing up so abruptly that her chair screeched against the floor, a sound that made her wince in the sudden vacuum of the flat. If the staff is on strike, then the staff shall be replaced. I do not require a golden-haired architect to exist. I am a Hyuga. I am the sun around which this entire pathetic city revolves. She marched into the living room, her silk skirt swishing like a warning. She reached for the television remote, intending to drown out the silence with the mindless chatter of the fashion news. She pressed the power button with a sharp, commanding thumb. Nothing. She pressed it again, then again, Harder. Obey me, she hissed. She realized, with a stinging jolt of humiliation, that Naruto usually pointed the remote at a specific, hidden sensor he had installed to keep the wires neat. She didn't know where it was. She was a queen without a scepter, a general who couldn't find the on switch. The frustration peaked, turning into a jagged, desperate anger. It wasn't just the television, it was the way the apartment seemed to be rejecting her now that its true heart was gone. The air felt stale. The light felt dim. Even her own reflection in the hallway mirror looked diminished. I will end this, she muttered, her eyes flashing with a dark, vengeful violet. I will call him, and I will demand he return this instant to fulfill his contractual obligations. He thinks he can offer me a divorce. He thinks he has the agency to walk away. She snatched her gold-plated smartphone from the coffee table. Her thumbs flew across the screen with lethal speed, pulling up his contact. She had saved him as property architect, a title that now felt like a bitter joke. Her thumb hovered over the call icon. Ring him, her pride screamed. Tell him the microwave is broken. Tell him the laundry is piling up. Tell him he is a peasant and that he belongs on that sofa. But then, the memory of the previous night surged back like a physical blow. She saw his eyes again, not the bright, reactive blue she loved to provoke, but that flat, exhausted sapphire. She heard his voice, so quiet it was terrifying. You can just ask for a divorce. I'll walk away. For the first time in her life, Hinata Hyuga felt a cold, sharp tremor of genuine fear. If she called him now and used her usual tone, he wouldn't argue. He wouldn't trip over himself to apologize. He would simply agree. He would say, I'll send the papers tomorrow, and then the silence would become permanent. Her thumb shook, millimeters above the glass. The Ice Queen felt the ice beginning to crack, not from warmth, but from the sheer weight of her own isolation. She realized that her arrogance was a weapon that only worked if there was someone there to bleed, and Naruto had stopped bleeding. He had simply left the battlefield. With a choked, frustrated sob, Hinata yanked her hand back and threw the phone onto the sofa. It bounced harmlessly on the cushion where he used to sleep, sinking into the spot where his head usually rested. I hate you, she whispered, her voice breaking as she sank to her knees on the hardwood floor, her silk robe spilling around her like a broken wing. I hate you for making me feel this emptiness. She stayed there for a long time, a masterpiece of a woman in a perfectly designed room, realized that for all her wealth, she didn't even know how to make the lights feel bright again. The morning air was crisp, bitingly cold, and smelled of asphalt and distant roasted chestnuts. Naruto stepped out of the glass-fronted lobby of his architectural firm, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his trench coat. He didn't look like a man who had just married into the most powerful family in the city, he looked like a ghost wandering through a world of solid stone. He walked aimlessly, his boots clicking against the pavement. He stopped at a street corner, looking up at the skyscrapers he usually admired for their structural beauty. Today, they just looked like tall, hollow boxes designed to keep people apart. He crossed the street and found a weathered wooden bench in a small, quiet plaza. He sat down, leaning his elbows on his knees, staring at the pigeons pecking at nothing. The weight of the previous night, the silence in the apartment, Hinata's cold fury, and the crushing realization that his integrity had led him to a dead end, was a physical ache in his chest. He stood up abruptly, unable to stay still, and turned to head back toward the office. Thud. A woman walking in the opposite direction collided with his shoulder. She stumbled, her shoulder bag slipping down her arm. Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't looking where, she started, her voice frantic as she adjusted her glasses. Naruto steadied her instinctively, his hands catching her elbows. It's okay. It was my fault. I was lost in thought. Are you all right? The woman looked up, her emerald eyes widening behind her frames. Her hair was a striking, soft pink, tucked behind her ears. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face. Naruto? She asked, her voice tilting upward in surprise. Naruto Namikaze. It is you. Naruto blinked, the fog in his mind clearing. Dr. Sakura. Sakura Haruno. What are the odds? In a city this big? Pretty slim. Sakura laughed, though her eyes were scanning his face with professional concern. She adjusted her medical coat, which was visible beneath her stylish wool jacket. You look like a bridge that's lost its center support. Where's Hinata? I assume the two of you are still in the blissful honeymoon phase, tucked away in some penthouse. Naruto's expression flickered, a shadow passing over his blue eyes. He looked away, focusing on a distant neon sign. She's at the house. Or the apartment. It's a long story, Sakura. Not exactly the blissful kind. Sakura's smile faded. She stepped closer, her doctor's intuition flaring. She saw the dark circles under his eyes and the way his shoulders were hunched forward as if protecting his heart. Naruto, you look miserable. And I don't just mean lack of sleep, miserable. I mean, the world is ending, miserable. Did something happen? Is it the marriage? Naruto let out a dry, jagged laugh. Is it that obvious? We had a disagreement. Or a series of them. I told her she could have a divorce if she wanted. I told her I'd take the blame. I think I finally realized that no matter how much I build, I can't fix a person who doesn't want to be fixed. Sakura sighed, a heavy, weary sound that echoed his own exhaustion. She looked down at her sensible shoes. I hear you. Believe me, I hear you. I've spent the last week trying to fix a man who treats my heart like a medical specimen he's finished studying. Sasuke, well, let's just say I'm not exactly winning any happiest wife awards either. She looked back up at him, her eyes softening with a shared, painful understanding. We're a pair, aren't we? The architect and the doctor, both failing to maintain our own structural integrity. She reached out and tucked her arm through his, her grip firm and sisterly. Come on. There's a quiet cafe 3 blocks from here. No silk, no obsidian tables, just terrible acoustics and really strong espresso. We're going. Sakura, I really should get back to the blueprints. The Phoenix project is falling behind and the Phoenix can wait 5 minutes to rise from the ashes, Sakura interrupted, pulling him along with the stubborn strength of a woman who dealt with difficult patients all day. You need to talk, and I need to vent before I accidentally perform surgery on a vending machine. No excuses, Naruto. Move your feet. Naruto hesitated, looking back at the cold, gray office building. Then he looked at Sakura, a friend who understood the weight of loving someone who didn't know how to love back. He let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a week. Fine, he muttered, finally letting her lead him away. But if the coffee is burnt, I'm blaming you. Deal, Sakura smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. The cafe was a small, tucked away sanctuary with exposed brick walls and the comforting, bitter aroma of dark roast. Naruto and Sakura sat in a corner booth, the steam from their cups rising between them like a fragile veil. Outside, the world moved on in a blur of gray suits and cold wind, but inside, the silence was heavy with the weight of 2 breaking hearts. Sakura stared into her latte, her spoon spinning in endless, mindless circles. Her emerald eyes were red-rimmed, the sharp, clinical brilliance she usually carried having been replaced by raw, hollow exhaustion. He did it, Naruto, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the low hum of the espresso machine. Sasuke, he served me the papers this morning. It's over. The Uchiha dream is officially a pile of ash. Naruto's hand froze midair, his blue eyes widening in genuine shock. He knew Sasuke was cold. He had felt that icy ambition firsthand at the cafe only yesterday, but the speed of it was staggering. He actually went through with it. Just like that. After everything you did for him, Sakura. After you built a life around his shadows. Sakura let out a dry, jagged laugh that sounded more like a sob. She looked up, a single tear escaping and tracing a path through her light makeup. He told me I wasn't substantial enough. He said he needed a partner who matched his trajectory. Someone stronger. Someone with a legacy that could anchor his own. He didn't even look me in the eye when he said it. He just signed the document and walked out to his car as if he were closing a real estate deal. That's insane, Naruto growled, his fist clenching on the table. You're a head surgeon. You're the strongest person I know. Who could possibly be stronger than you in this city? I don't know, Sakura sighed, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. He wouldn't say. Just that he had found a better alignment. It's a strange word to use for a human being, isn't it? Alignment. Like we're just beams in a building he's renovating. Naruto leaned across the table, his sapphire eyes burning with a protective, brotherly heat. He reached out and placed his hand over hers, his touch warm and grounding. Listen to me, Sakura. Sasuke is a genius at business, but he's a blind man when it comes to people. Any man in this city, any man in the world, would be lucky to have someone like you. You're kind, you're brilliant, and you actually care about something other than a bank account. If he can't see that, then he's the one who's lost, not you. Sakura looked at his hand, then up at his face. A small, genuine smile finally touched her lips, flickering like a candle in a dark room. Thank you, Naruto. You always knew how to make a structural failure feel like a temporary setback. You really are a wonderful man. Sometimes I wonder how Hinata, well, how she doesn't see what she has. She paused, her gaze turning sharp and curious as she regained a bit of her strength. Speaking of the Ice Queen, are you really going to do it? Are you going to go through with the divorce? You told her she could have it. Is that what you want? Naruto pulled his hand back, rubbing the back of his neck as he stared out the window. The image of Hinata sitting alone in the dark apartment flashed through his mind, the way she had looked so small on that lumpy sofa, yet still so impossibly arrogant. I don't know, Naruto admitted, his voice dropping to a weary murmur. Part of me wants to run as far away as possible. I want a home where I don't have to apologize for existing. But another part of me, I feel like I'm leaving a bridge half finished. It feels like a failure. Sakura watched him, her mind beginning to whirl with a sudden, dark calculation. She looked at Naruto, his broad shoulders, his kind heart, his untapped potential. If he divorced Hinata, he would be free. And if Sasuke was going after Hinata, which she suspected with a sinking feeling in her gut, then Naruto would be left alone. He is a masterpiece, she thought, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. He is everything Sasuke isn't. If he leaves her, if he steps out of that Hyuga shadow, it would be better for him. And maybe it would be better for me, too. Why should Hinata have the only man who actually knows how to be human? She leaned forward, her voice becoming soft, persuasive, and edged with a subtle, desperate bite. Naruto, look at me, she said, her emerald eyes locking onto his. You deserve peace. You deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated. Hinata will never change. She will consume you until there's nothing left of your integrity, but a pile of dust. Don't wait for her to break you completely. She reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve. Leave her, Naruto. Sign the papers. Walk away from that cold apartment and don't look back. Give yourself a chance to be happy with someone who actually wants to be in the room with you. The words hung in the air between them, a heavy, tempting invitation to give up the fight. The atmosphere in the cramped cafe grew uncomfortably warm, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and the heavy, unspoken shifts in the room's energy. Naruto sat back, his heart hammering against his ribs as he processed Sakura's words. Her suggestion to walk away had felt like a suggestion to finally drop a weight he had been carrying for far too long. Sakura, why are you telling me this? Naruto asked, his voice shaking slightly. You've always been Hinata's friend. You've always tried to bridge the gap between us. Why are you suddenly telling me to tear the whole structure down? Sakura's emerald eyes didn't waver. She leaned across the table, the space between them shrinking until Naruto could see the flecks of gold in her pupils. Because I finally understand what it's like to be starved for air, Naruto, she whispered, her voice honey-sweet but laced with a quiet desperation. I'm divorced now. I'm free. And you're in a prison that doesn't even have a view. Why should we both suffer alone? We've always understood each other better than they understood us. We could try, couldn't we? We could try to find something together that isn't built on contracts and coldness. Naruto's face instantly turned a shade of crimson that rivaled a sunset. Together. You mean, you and me? Like, us? Sakura, what are you saying? You're a doctor. You're brilliant. And you're the man who makes me feel like I'm more than just a background character, Sakura interrupted. She stood up slightly, leaning further over the table. She reached up, placing one delicate hand over her own heart, and the other gently cupping her own cheek, tilting her head with a look that was both vulnerable and provocatively bold. Tell me, Naruto, am I not beautiful? Am I not someone worth looking at? Am I so different from the Ice Queen that you can't even imagine it? Naruto's breath hitched. His eyes darted from her face to her hand, then back again. He was trapped in a whirlwind of hormones and confusion. I mean, of course you're beautiful, Sakura. You've always been. I mean, you're amazing. But this is so sudden. My head is spinning. Sakura let out a soft, melodious laugh, a sound of genuine amusement at his classic, flustered reaction. You haven't changed a bit, Naruto. Still the same boy who doesn't know what to do when a woman looks him in the eye. She laughed again, the sound bright and clear in the quiet cafe. It was a moment of light-hearted connection, a brief respite from the darkness of their respective lives. But the laughter died in the air as if hit by a sudden, Arctic frost. Neither of them noticed the figure standing outside the cafe's glass window. Neither of them saw the charcoal gray pencil skirt or the silk blouse that shimmered under the pale morning sun. Hinata Hyuga stood on the pavement, her hand frozen in the act of reaching for the door handle. She had tracked him down. She had come to find him, to yell at him, perhaps even to apologize in her own twisted way. Instead, she had seen it all. She had seen the way Naruto's hand had rested on Sakura's. She had seen Sakura leaning in, her hand on her chest, her eyes full of a fire that Hinata had never allowed herself to show. She had seen the man she called a tool, looking at another woman with a face full of color and life. Hinata's lilac eyes didn't fill with tears. They turned into shards of jagged, violet glass. Her grip on her designer handbag tightened until the leather groaned. Her heart, which had been feeling a strange, hollow ache all morning, suddenly slammed shut, encased in a layer of ice so thick it felt like it would never melt again. She didn't enter. She didn't scream. She simply stepped back into the shadows of the alley, her breath coming in shallow, jagged gasps, watching through the glass as her husband laughed with her best friend. The interior of the Velvet Edge was a sanctuary of high-end vanity, smelling of expensive hairspray, botanical oils, and the sharp scent of chemical dyes. Karen, with her vibrant red hair and sharp, rectangular glasses, was busy mixing a bowl of rose-pink tint when Sakura floated into the salon. Well, look at you, Karen remarked, adjusting her glasses as she eyed Sakura through the mirror. I expected you to come in here looking like a drowned cat after the news hit the tabloids. But you're glowing. It's suspicious, Sakura. Highly suspicious. Sakura climbed into the plush leather chair, a playful, jagged smirk on her lips. Let's just say I've realized that being an Uchiha was like wearing a corset made of barbed wire. It looks prestigious, but it's remarkably hard to breathe. Now that I've taken it off, I feel like I can actually expand my lungs. Karen laughed, a raspy, energetic sound. She began to drape a black silk cape around Sakura's shoulders. And Sasuke, the great avenger, himself. Oh, please, Sakura scoffed, leaning her head back into the washing basin as Karen started the warm water. Sasuke is currently off looking for a woman who is structurally significant enough for his ego. I hope he finds a mountain. It's the only thing that might not collapse under the weight of his self-importance. I'm done being his emotional architect. I'd rather work on a new project. A new project? Karen grinned, scrubbing Sakura's scalp. Does this project happen to have golden hair and a very confused look on his face? Karen, shish. Sakura laughed, though she didn't deny it. After the wash, Karen moved Sakura back to the styling station. The salon was relatively quiet, with the other stylists in the back room or tending to customers in the private booths. Close your eyes, Dr. Haruno, Karen commanded, picking up a high-powered, professional hair dryer. I'm going to give you the new life blowout. By the time I'm done, you'll look so good that architects will be falling off their scaffolding. Sakura hummed in agreement, her eyes drifting shut. The rhythmic, warm hum of the dryer began to fill her ears, lulling her into a state of blissful relaxation. She felt the brush pull through her damp hair, a bit firmer than usual, perhaps, but she didn't mind. She was too busy imagining a life where she didn't have to apologize for her feelings. She didn't hear the bell chime at the front door. She didn't see the woman who walked in, draped in a midnight blue trench coat, her eyes looking like frozen lavender lakes. Hinata Hyuga moved with the silence of a ghost. She approached the station where Karen was working. Karen looked up, her mouth opening to greet the heiress, but Hinata's expression stopped the air in her throat. Hinata didn't say a word. She simply reached out, her hand wrapping around the handle of the hair dryer. With a slow, icy grace, Hinata placed a stack of high-denomination bills on the counter and gave a small, terrifyingly calm nod toward the back room. Karen, recognizing the Hyuga wrath, when she saw it, took the money and vanished without a sound, leaving the dryer in Hinata's gloved hands. The dryer continued to hum. Hinata took the round brush, her movements precise and lethal. She yanked a section of Sakura's pink hair a little too hard. Ouch. Karen, careful, Sakura murmured, her eyes still closed, a small smile playing on her lips. Don't pull so hard. I know I'm exciting, but my scalp is still attached to my head. The dryer stayed close to Sakura's ear, the heat intensifying. You know, Karen, Sakura continued, her voice drifting into a confident, almost predatory tone. I think I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to take Naruto away from all that coldness. He deserves someone who laughs. He deserves me. Suddenly, the brush twisted sharply, pinning a lock of Sakura's hair against the heat of the dryer. It's funny how you talk about deserving things, my dear friend, a voice whispered, cutting through the hum of the machine like a serrated blade. Especially when you are sitting in a chair I could buy, in a salon I could burn, talking about a man who is still, legally and spiritually, mine. Sakura's eyes flew open, her breath hitched in her throat as she looked into the mirror. There, standing behind her, was not the red-headed Karen. It was Hinata. Her face was a mask of aristocratic perfection, but her eyes were burning with a dark, violet fire that Sakura had never seen before. Hinata reached over and clicked the off switch on the hair dryer. The sudden silence in the salon was deafening. Hello, Sakura, Hinata said, her voice dropping into a soft, melodic purr that made the hair on the back of Sakura's neck stand up. I believe you were just telling me how much you enjoy new projects. Sakura sat frozen in the chair, the black cape feeling like a shroud. Hinata, How long have you been standing there? Long enough to realize that the integrity Naruto talks about doesn't seem to be contagious, Hinata replied. She leaned down, her face inches from Sakura's in the reflection, her hand still holding the heavy hair dryer like a weapon. Tell me, doctor, what is the medical term for a friend who tries to steal a husband while the bed is still warm? Is it parasite or opportunist? The Ice Queen had arrived, and the salon had just turned into a freezer. The atmosphere in the salon dropped to absolute zero. Hinata's grip on the hair dryer tightened, her knuckles white, her presence looming over Sakura like a dark cloud over a fragile flower. The mirror reflected a study in contrasts. Sakura, trapped and vulnerable in the styling chair, and Hinata, standing tall with the cold, predatory grace of a goddess who had been insulted. You look surprised, Sakura, Hinata whispered, her voice a poisonous velvet. Did you think I was too busy playing the Ice Queen to notice a starving street cat sniffing around my trash? Or did you think your little medical degree gave you the right to perform surgery on my marriage? Sakura's face flushed with a mixture of shame and rising heat. Hinata, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Hinata interrupted, her voice sharpening into a blade. You are a pathetic, desperate slut. A common traitor who hides behind the mask of a best friend, while trying to crawl into my husband's lap the moment he leaves the room. You're a bottom feeder, Sakura. You spent years being Sasuke's doormat, and now that he's finally wiped his boots on you and thrown you away, you want to steal what belongs to me. I didn't steal anything, Sakura snapped, finally finding her voice as the humiliation turned into a burning rage. She yanked the black cape off her neck, standing up to face Hinata, though she was shaking. Naruto is miserable with you. He's a human being, not a piece of furniture you can lock in an apartment. I was comforting a friend. Comforting. Hinata let out a jagged, cruel laugh. She stepped closer, invading Sakura's personal space until their chests almost touched. Is that what they call it now? Putting your hands on your chest and pouting like a cheap whore in a dive bar. You aren't his friend. You're a parasite looking for a new host because your Uchiha dream turned into a nightmare. I am sick of this. Sakura screamed, her voice cracking as the walls of the salon seemed to close in. I am sick of your arrogance. I am sick of your money. I am sick of the way you treat everyone like they are dirt beneath your designer heels. Naruto deserves better than you. He deserves to be loved, not managed. Hinata's expression didn't change. She didn't flinch. Instead, a slow, terrifying smirk spread across her lips, the look of a demon who had just found a new soul to crush. Love, Hinata purred, her voice dropping to a lethal, gutter-level rasp. You think you can offer him love? You're a divorcee, a discarded scrap of a woman. Listen to me closely, you little bitch. I could end you with a single phone call. I could have your medical license revoked by lunch. I could ensure that no hospital in this country, or the next, would even let you sweep their floors. I can turn you into a homeless beggar, rotting in the streets, screaming at the moon about the love you almost had. Sakura's eyes widened in horror, her breath hitching. You wouldn't. Try me, Hinata hissed, her eyes glowing with a dark, sadistic fire. I am a Hyuga. I own the ground you walk on. You are nothing but a temporary amusement for me to break. Sakura, pushed to the edge of her sanity, let out a hysterical, bitter laugh. You think you've won. You think you're so powerful. Do you even know why Sasuke divorced me today, Hinata? He did it for you. He told me he wanted a stronger alignment. He wants to marry you. He thinks you're the only one who can match his ambition. You're so busy guarding Naruto that you don't even realize you're just another prize for an Uchiha. The silence that followed was heavy. Hinata stared at Sakura for a long beat, then she began to laugh. It wasn't a small giggle, it was a loud, mocking, and genuinely amused peal of laughter that filled the entire salon. Sasuke. Hinata gasped through her laughter, her eyes full of genuine derision. That brooding, self-important emo. He thinks he can align himself with me. Sasuke Uchiha is a child playing with fire in a house made of paper. He's a bore, a relic, and frankly, he lacks the sturdiness that I've grown accustomed to. She stopped laughing abruptly, her face snapping back into a mask of pure, unadulterated evil. She grabbed Sakura by the chin, her fingers digging into the doctor's skin with bruising force. Listen to me, you pathetic failure. I am not divorced. I am the wife of Naruto Namikaze, and as long as I say he is mine, he is mine. If you ever speak to him again, if you even breathe in his direction, I will not just ruin your career. I will ruin your life. I will make sure the name, Sakura Haruno, is synonymous with trash. Hinata leaned in, whispering into Sakura's ear. Stay in your lane, doctor. You're a loser who couldn't keep her own husband. Don't think for a second you're capable of taking mine. Hinata released her chin with a forceful shove, causing Sakura to stumble back against the chair. Without another word, Hinata turned on her heel, her midnight blue trench coat billowing behind her like a shroud. She walked out of the salon, the bell chiming a cheerful sound that felt like a mockery of the carnage she had left behind. Sakura sank to the floor, her hands over her face, shaking as the realization of Hinata's true malice finally settled into her bones. The street outside the architectural firm was a blur of gray to Hinata. She marched through the revolving glass doors of the office tower, her heels striking the polished marble floor with the cadence of a firing squad. Every employee who caught a glimpse of her face, pale, beautiful, and twisted into a mask of pure, aristocratic rage, instantly looked down at their desks, praying they wouldn't be the target of her next outburst. She didn't stop at the reception desk. She didn't ask for permission. She bypassed the security gate with a glare that could have deactivated the sensors through sheer force of will. Naruto, she called out as she reached the open plan drafting floor. Her voice was a whip crack, slicing through the hum of computers and the quiet murmurs of engineers. Architect, appear this instant. I am not in the mood for hide and seek. The office went silent. A young intern dropped a stack of papers. But there was no reply. No golden head popped up from behind a partition. No clumsy apology followed. Hinata's eyes scanned the room like a hawk. She stormed toward the glass-walled private office at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar. She kicked it open, the wood hitting the stopper with a violent bang. Naruto, I swear if you are cowering under. She stopped. The office was empty. A single desk lamp cast a pool of warm light over a sprawling blueprint of the Phoenix project. A cold cup of coffee sat next to a stack of architectural journals. His chair, a simple ergonomic thing he had probably assembled himself, was pushed back as if he had just stepped out for a moment. But the air was still. The room was devoid of his chaotic, restless energy. Where is he? She hissed, turning back to the terrified staff outside. Where is my husband? He left for a site visit an hour ago, Mrs. Namikaze, a senior architect stammered, clutching a ruler like a holy relic. He didn't say when he'd be back. Hinata didn't acknowledge the man. She stepped back into the office and slammed the door, shutting out the prying eyes of the world. The silence of the room felt like an insult. She paced the small space, her silk skirt swishing like a caged tiger. Finally, her legs felt heavy, the adrenaline of her confrontation with Sakura beginning to bleed into a dark, pulsing headache. She sank into his desk chair, his chair. It smelled of him, cedarwood, old paper, and that faint, annoying scent of orange-flavored candy. How dare he be busy, she whispered to the blueprints. How dare he have a life outside of my misery. She snatched her gold-plated phone from her bag, her fingers trembling with a mix of fury and something she refused to name. She hit his contact. Ring, ring, ring. Pick up, you golden-haired idiot, she muttered, her eyes fixed on a photo of a bridge pinned to his corkboard. The person you are trying to reach is unavailable. Please leave a message after the. She hung up and dialed again. Immediately. Ring. Ring. Answer me. I am Hinata Hyuga. You do not ignore me. Again, the voicemail. Her vision blurred with a flash of red. She slammed the phone down onto the mahogany desk, the sound echoing in the small room. She looked at the blueprints spread before her, complex, beautiful, and built with a precision she realized she could never replicate. You think you can hide behind your buildings? She growled, her voice dropping into that lethal, dark tone she used when she was ready to destroy a rival. You think you can find solace in the arms of that pink-haired failure and then simply disappear? She reached out and gripped the edge of the desk, her manicured nails digging into the wood. Her pride was a roaring fire, but beneath it, the emptiness of the apartment from this morning was beginning to seep back in. He was winning. By simply not being there, he was making her feel small. I will find you, Naruto, she whispered, her lilac eyes narrowing into slits of pure, focused malice. And when I do, I will show you exactly what happens to a man who tries to walk away from a Hyuga. You wanted a divorce. You wanted freedom. I will make you beg for the comfort of your lumpy sofa before the sun sets. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with a slow, deliberate motion. She took one last look at his empty chair, her heart hardening back into the impenetrable ice that was her trademark. I'll show you, she muttered to the shadows. I'll show you both. The neon signs of the city flickered like dying stars as Hinata Hyuga marched through the grime-streaked streets of the old district. Her high heels, worth more than the small ramen shops she was passing, clicked sharply against the uneven pavement. Ramen, she hissed, pulling her silk trench coat tighter. Of all the pedestrian, carbohydrate-heavy obsessions, he had to choose the one that smells like boiled salt and despair. She had spent 3 hours wandering. She didn't know which shop was his favorite. To her, they all looked like humid boxes of steam and loud slurping. She felt like a displaced goddess walking through a swamp. Her pride was screaming, but her stubbornness was louder. Finally, she saw a small, weathered curtain hanging over a doorway. Ichiraku. If he isn't in here, I am burning this entire district to the ground, she muttered, ducking under the curtain. The interior was cramped, smelling of miso and pork broth. And there, in the corner, sat a familiar shock of spiky golden hair. Naruto wasn't eating. He was face down on the wooden counter, his arms folded like a pillow, snoring softly. A half-empty bowl of ramen sat beside him, looking as exhausted as he did. Hinata's eye twitched. She had been roaming the freezing streets, fighting off the urge to call a hitman on Sakura, and he was napping. She slid onto the stool next to him, the wood creaking under her expensive frame. She leaned in, her perfume clashing violently with the scent of garlic. Architect, she whispered, her voice a low, vibrating threat. Wake up. Your sentence has not been commuted. Naruto didn't move. He let out a little puff of air, his cheek squishing against the wood. Extra pork, he mumbled in his sleep. Hinata's face turned a dangerous shade of violet. She tried to maintain her regal composure, poking his shoulder with a manicured fingernail. Naruto Namikaze, if you do not open your eyes this instant, I will replace your drafting table with a toddler's sandbox. Still, nothing but a rhythmic snore. That was it. The Ice Queen's cooling system failed. She stood up, her shadow looming over the entire counter like a dark omen. Naruto, wake up, she shrieked, her voice hitting a decibel that made the soup bowls rattle. Naruto bolted upright with a yelp, his arms flailing. He slipped off the stool, his chin hitting the counter before he scrambled to find his footing. Gah! The building. Is it collapsing? Earthquake. The entire restaurant went silent. Construction workers, students, and the old chef all froze, noodles hanging out of their mouths as they stared at the terrifyingly beautiful woman screaming at the disheveled man. Naruto blinked, his eyes finally focusing on Hinata. Hinata, what are you? Don't. Hinata. Me. She roared. She reached out, grabbing him by the collar of his jacket and shaking him with a strength that defied physics. He rattled back and forth like a leaf in a hurricane, his head bobbing helplessly. I have been searching for hours. You don't answer your phone. You sleep in public like a common vagrant. Do you have any idea how much this coat costs? It isn't meant for ramen hunting. A brave patron at the next table cleared his throat. Hey, lady, maybe take it easy on the guy. Hinata whipped her head around, her eyes flashing with a predatory, lethal glare that made the man's soul leave his body. Look at your noodles, or I will buy this building and turn it into a shoe closet. The entire restaurant instantly looked down. It was a synchronized movement, 10 heads hitting their bowls at once, the sound of aggressive slurping filling the air as they pretended to be invisible. Hinata turned back to Naruto, who was now trembling. She didn't let go of his collar. You, she hissed, her face inches from his, are coming with me, now. But I haven't paid. I'll buy the restaurant later. Move. In a display of sheer, terrifying dominance, Hinata turned on her heel and began to march toward the exit. She didn't let go of his collar. Naruto was forced to half stumble, half skid behind her, his feet barely touching the floor as she dragged him out like a naughty puppy being taken to the vet. Wait, my shoes. Hinata, my dignity. Naruto wailed as they burst through the curtains into the night air. You lost your dignity the moment you married me, Naruto. Now keep up. The patrons of Ichiraku waited exactly 3 minutes after the door closed before they dared to breathe again. The moment the apartment door slammed shut, the Ice Queen facade shattered, replaced by a whirlwind of high fashion fury. Don't you dare move a muscle. Hinata shrieked, kicking off her heels. Naruto didn't wait to find out what was next. He took one look at her face, which was a terrifying shade of sunset orange, and bolted toward the living room. I'm moving very fast in the opposite direction. Get back here, you golden-haired coward. Hinata screamed, giving chase. It was a ridiculous sight. The heiress of the Hyuga Empire, in her $1,000 silk stockings, sprinting around the lumpy sofa like a track star, while Naruto used his architectural knowledge to calculate the most efficient escape routes around the coffee table. You pushed me to this, Hinata. Naruto yelled, leaping over a footstool. You told me I was a tool. You told me you hated me. A man has feelings, you know. I went to find peace, not a lawsuit. Peace. Hinata skidded around the corner of the kitchen island, her hair flying wildly. You went to find comfort while I was suffering in this desolate wasteland of a home. Do you have any idea what I've been through today? I've lived like a commoner in a disaster movie. Naruto stopped mid-stride, hiding behind a large floor lamp. What are you talking about? You've been here for 12 hours. Exactly. Hinata pointed a trembling, manicured finger at him, her voice cracking with dramatic despair. The microwave looked at me with its cold, digital eye and refused to obey. The laundry bin is growing into a mountain. And the breakfast. Naruto, the breakfast was a tragedy. I had to eat a cold croissant. A cold one. Do you know how that feels? It felt like eating a soggy cardboard box. My digestive system is in mourning. Naruto blinked, his jaw dropping. You're mad at me because you had to eat a cold croissant. I am mad because you are my hands. You are my feet. You are the person who makes the humming boxes work. Hinata yelled, stepping closer, her eyes suddenly welling with a mix of rage and genuine, exhausted frustration. Life without you in this apartment isn't quiet, Naruto. It's a series of technical failures and nutritional insults. It's cold, and it's loud, and I didn't even know where the extra towels were. Everything is wrong when you aren't here to be yelled at. Naruto froze. He stood behind the lamp, completely stunned. His blue eyes searched her face. Wait, Hinata, are you saying, you actually missed me? In your own weird, bossy way? Hinata's face turned even redder, if that was possible. She stood up straight, crossing her arms over her chest, trying to regain her dignity while standing in her socks. Don't flatter yourself, architect, she snapped, though her voice lacked its usual icy bite. I missed having a functioning household. Now, shut up right now, you arrogant peasant. I don't want to hear another word about feelings, or divorce, or Sakura's coffee preferences. She grabbed him by the arm and shoved him toward the kitchen. You want to make it up to me? You want to earn your spot on that lumpy sofa? Fine. Fix the demon box. I tried to make it work, and now it's making a sound like a dying tractor. Naruto stumbled into the kitchen, sighing with relief that the chasing had stopped. Fine. It's probably just a. He stopped dead in his tracks. The kitchen looked like a battlefield. There was cereal scattered across the floor like confetti. A carton of milk sat open and weeping on the counter. But the centerpiece was the microwave. It was covered in a strange, sticky purple substance, and a single, charred piece of bread was fused to the glass door. It smelled like burnt plastic and expensive perfume. Hinata, Naruto whispered, staring at the carnage. What did you do to the demon box? I pressed pizza. Hinata yelled from the living room, sounding defensive. It seemed like the most authoritative button. It's not my fault the machine chose violence. Naruto started to laugh. He couldn't help it. The great Hinata Hyuga, defeated by a 900-watt appliance. He grabbed a sponge and shook his head. Well, welcome home to me, I guess. I'll fix your demon box, Hinata. But you're helping me clean this floor. I am a Hyuga. I do not clean floors. Then I guess the croissant tomorrow will be even colder, Naruto sang out. There was a long silence, followed by the sound of shuffling feet as Hinata reluctantly entered the kitchen, reaching for a paper towel with a look of utter disgust. The kitchen was a scene of utter domestic warfare. Hinata, the woman who had likely never touched a cleaning chemical in her life, was on her knees, scrubbing a particularly stubborn patch of dried purple syrup off the tiles. I despise this, she hissed, her voice muffled as she fought with a sponge. I despise the person who invented gravity. I despise the person who decided that floors should be made of things that hold onto stains. And most of all, Naruto, I despise you for making me aware that elbow grease is an actual requirement of existence. Naruto stood by the counter, trying to focus on repairing the demon box microwave, but his eyes kept drifting. Because she was bent over, scrubbing with a frantic, incoordinated energy, her silk robe had shifted. The sight of her, the curve of her back, the way she moved, sent a jolt of heat to his face. He felt like a criminal just for having eyes. Hinata, you're doing great, Naruto stammered, his face turning a deep, architectural shade of brick red. He quickly turned his attention to a bowl of rice, stirring it with enough intensity to suggest his life depended on the perfect grain consistency. Just keep scrubbing. Don't mind me. I'm just looking at this very interesting rice. Shut up, Hinata barked, tossing a used paper towel into the bin with the accuracy of a professional athlete. If I find a single speck of dust tomorrow, I am hiring a team of assassins to liquidate the manufacturer of this tile. Finally, with a groan that sounded like a weary soldier returning from the front lines, Hinata pushed herself up. She was breathing heavily, her face flushed and a few strands of dark hair sticking to her damp forehead. She didn't even look at the floor, she just stumbled toward Naruto, looking for support. She leaned her entire weight against his side, her shoulder pressing firmly into his chest. Because of the height difference in her exhausted state, her chest pressed directly against his arm. Naruto jumped as if he'd been struck by lightning. The sensation of her softness against him was overwhelming, far more intimate than any of their icy arguments in the boardroom. Hinata, he squeaked, his voice cracking. What are you doing? You're leaning. You're very much leaning on me. I am exhausted, she murmured, her eyes half closed, completely oblivious, or perhaps entirely indifferent, to the effect she was having on him. My bones have turned to jelly. Your shoulder is the only structural support in this room that isn't covered in purple slime. Be a useful pillar for once. But your chest is, it's touching my arm. Naruto blurted out, his brain short-circuiting. You shouldn't lean like this. It's not appropriate. Hinata opened one lavender eye, looking up at him with a gaze that was both drowsy and dangerously sharp. She didn't move an inch. If anything, she leaned in closer, her silk robe rustling against his skin. It is not your concern what parts of me are touching what parts of you, she said, her voice dropping into a low, haughty purr. I am the owner of this arrangement. If I decide to use you as a human crutch, you will remain stationary and silent. Do you understand, architect? Naruto swallowed hard, his heart drumming a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Yes, ma'am. She stayed there for a long, agonizing minute, letting him suffer in his own embarrassment while she caught her breath. Then, with a sudden, regal sniff, she pushed herself off him, smoothing her robe as if the last 60 seconds of vulnerability had never happened. The kitchen is passable, she declared, looking at the floor with a sneer. I am going to the living room. Finish the food. If it is served 1 degree below, perfect, I am throwing the plate at your golden head. She swept out of the kitchen, her head held high. I shall be on the sofa. Do not keep me waiting. Naruto stood in the silence of the kitchen, staring at the steam rising from the rice, his arms still feeling the ghost of her warmth. The kitchen was thick with a silence that felt heavier than the architectural blueprints Naruto spent his days agonizing over. The only sound was the rhythmic clink of chopsticks against porcelain and the soft hum of the now repaired, demon box, microwave. Hinata sat perfectly upright, her movements graceful despite the exhaustion clinging to her frame. She ate with a surgical precision, her eyes never once lifting from her plate. Naruto, on the other hand, felt like he was chewing on sand. Every time he shifted, he remembered the warmth of her leaning against him, and his face would flare up in a fresh wave of heat. Finally, Hinata set her chopsticks down with a delicate clack. I am finished, she announced, her voice returning to its icy, regal tone. She stood up, smoothing her silk robe. I am going to sleep. This day has been a structural disaster, and I require 8 hours of darkness to forget it ever happened. She paused at the kitchen threshold, turning back to cast a shadow over Naruto. And let me be perfectly clear, architect. If I wake up tomorrow morning and find that sofa empty, or if I hear so much as a floorboard creak toward the front door, I will not just sue you. I will have your name erased from the registry of the living. Do not think of fleeing again. I get it, Hinata, Naruto sighed, slumping his shoulders. I'm not going anywhere. I'll get my blanket and hit the sofa. He began to walk toward the living room, but Hinata's voice stopped him like a physical barrier. No. Naruto turned, confused. No. What do you mean? No. You want me to sleep on the floor now? Hinata crossed her arms, her gaze shifting to the side, a faint, almost imperceptible pink hue touching her cheekbones. The sofa is lumpy. It makes a squeaking sound that is offensive to my ears and disrupts the feng shui of the apartment. Furthermore, it is quite cold tonight. She let out a sharp, haughty sniff. I do not wish for my legal husband to die of pneumonia and leave me with a mountain of paperwork. Therefore, you will sleep in the bedroom. On the bed. Naruto's jaw dropped so low it nearly hit the tiles. What? In the bed? With you? But Hinata, you said. I am merely showing pity. She snapped, her voice rising in a defensive shriek. It is an act of Hyuga charity. Do not make it more than it is, you conceited peasant. Before he could argue, she marched over, grabbed his wrist with a surprisingly firm grip, and began dragging him toward the master bedroom. Naruto stumbled after her, his brain completely malfunctioning. Wait, Hinata, this is moving too fast. I haven't even brushed my teeth twice yet. She hauled him into the dimly lit bedroom, where the scent of jasmine was overwhelming. She pointed a finger at the vast, king-sized bed covered in charcoal gray silk sheets. You will stay on your side, she commanded, her eyes narrowing into lethal slits. There is an invisible border exactly down the center. If even a single hair of your golden head crosses that line, I will consider it an act of war. And if you attempt anything perverted, if your hand even twitches in my direction while I am sleeping, I will personally ensure you never design anything more complex than a doghouse for the rest of your natural life. Naruto swallowed hard, staring at the bed as if it were a minefield. I understand. Center line. No twitching. Doghouses. Got it. Good, Hinata said, turning her back to him to climb under the covers. Now get in and be silent. I am already regretting my generosity. Naruto climbed in, keeping as close to the edge of the mattress as humanly possible, his heart thumping against his ribs like a trapped bird. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, realizing that the Ice Queen was only inches away, and that tonight,